Good evening, Winnipeg. Good evening, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this evening on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good evening, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve post-game show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mindell, talking about Game 1, Round 1 between the Winnipeg Jets and the Edmonton Oilers. A 4-1 victory for the Winnipeg Jets, the game-winning goal coming from an unlikely source in Dominic Toninato, his first of the season for the Winnipeg Jets, just in the lineup simply because of injuries to the Winnipeg Jets forward group. He comes through big time for a guy who spent the vast majority of the year on the taxi squad. A very tidy victory by the Jets, 4-1. And the Jets were quick to say before the game that the regular season and what happened in the regular season versus this Edmonton Oilers team wasn't going to carry over into the playoffs. And they certainly flipped the script and ruined the narrative with tonight's Game 1 victory. Gentlemen, nice to see you both. Dave Minuk, who does not have a fire picture behind him, so that's a little bit different.
No, I listened to the audience. The audience told me, they said it's enough with the fire. We're in a warm part of the season, so it's time to get rid of the fire pick. So the fire is gone, and we're now in Tranquil River territory.
There you go, Tranquil River territory. Very nice. Ezra Ginsburg is down below. Ezzy, good to see you on this Wednesday evening.
What's going on,
the
boys?
Jets. Well, I'll tell you what, that was a very tidy victory by the Winnipeg Jets. 4-1. They're without, of course, Pierre-Luc Dubois. They're without Nikolai Ehlers, but they don't skip a beat. They probably play their most complete game of the season against the Edmonton Oilers in terms of certainly the defensive structure and their, as we talked about on Saturday's preview show, the attention to detail. But very impressive for the Winnipeg Jets. They feel good about themselves with tonight's victory.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, Drew, like the obvious narrative going into this game was that, the Jets had lost the 7 games out of 9. And, could they shut down Connor McDavid, right? And obviously they did that tonight. And McDavid was noticeable, right, guys? Like, even if he doesn't get on the score sheet, like with his speed and skill, he's going to make a difference out there. But, one of the weirdest things I thought about this game is just how much of it was played at 5-on-5, right? Like Oilers get the one power play. It's really rare that you only have one power play in a game. And for the most part, I thought, the Jets were pretty even with the Oilers. The obvious, middle frame guys, the Jets were really just weathering the storm there. But, the first period, they clearly came out with a plan to be physical. We saw Derek Forbort all over Leon Draisaitl. Like Adam Lowry was throwing his weight around. Logan Stanley was throwing his weight around. But the story of this game has to be, as you mentioned, Drew, Dominic Toninato. We thought it probably was going to be Jansen Harkins. But, as Dave talked about, leading up to the first game, Toninato finished strong with the Moose. He only played the 3 games. But just a great story, right, for a guy that, didn't start the season off healthy, right, because he was on the COVID-19 list. And then, he ended up playing a few games at the end of the season. So, good for him. And, just, on that goal that we thought went to Logan Stanley initially, but we didn't even think it was a goal. Then obviously Toninato with just a beautiful tip. And Nate Thompson picks up a couple assists. And that's what happens, guys, in the playoffs, right? Like we talk about it every year, not just, for the Jets, but any team. It seems like, the unlikely heroes always seem to step up. So it's only one game, but that's what you wanted to do, right? You wanted to put the pressure on the Oilers, and now the pressure is on the Oilers. They have to win game 2, or it's going to be very difficult for them to win the series. We know that if you go down 2 games, the likelihood of you winning 4 or 5 games is really low. So, and we have to throw in that obviously Connor Hellebuyck wasn't going to lose his birthday. So overall, he was pretty solid. He didn't need to steal the game, but, what did he make? 30, 34 saves, 35 saves, Dave. So overall, a pretty good performance for the birthday boy.
I'm sure that the Jets fans would like it to be like Ken Wiebe when every day is Kenny's birthday. So maybe it'll be every day it'll be Connor Hellebuyck's birthday if that's the performance that he's going to put forth for the Winnipeg Jets. Certainly a tidy effort by the Jets, and prior to the series starting, I was on with our buddy Dave Jamieson this afternoon, and we basically
Name
said
drop.
it almost boiled a bit of a name drop, no big deal, but we said at the outset, it's almost if Connor Hellebuyck is better in the series than Connor McDavid, the Jets have a pretty good chance.
Yep.
And certainly Connor Hellebuyck was the better of the two tonight. Of course, it's not the easiest comparison, a goaltender versus a forward, but if the Jets get goaltending like that from Connor Hellebuyck in the course of this series, they're probably going to be in a pretty decent place, at the end of however many games it goes.
Yeah, and what have we said all along? We said that Connor Hellebuyck will be the most important player for the Winnipeg Jets. More important than Mark Scheifele, more important than Nikolai Ehlers, more important than Pierre-Luc Dubois. Connor Hellebuyck is the lifeblood of this Winnipeg Jets team. So, and I don't think anybody who watches this team, and we know everybody in the chat, by the way, kudos to everybody smashing that like button. We've got over 300 of you already in here. Everybody smashing the like button. We appreciate that.
After a playoff game, Dave, we want to see like twice as many likes at least, right?
I mean, if we don't get to like 500 likes tonight, I'm very disappointed.
I was thinking 1,000, but we'll say 500 too.
We're only 6 minutes in right now. We're plus 100, so I like that number. But we're going to keep this thing rolling. So I'm looking forward to that number jumping up. So to me, again, like I said, throughout the course of the season and specifically the kind of the lead up to this playoff series, we really talked about it. It's going to be, what can Connor Hellebuyck do, and will he be the guy who's going to be that difference maker? And again, he's the most important player on this team. There really is nobody else who really, the team lives and dies with Connor Hellebuyck. And based on the way he's kind of locked in, that's a good thing for this Winnipeg Jets team, and that because you need it. Connor McDavid, I liked what the Jets did. I like the way Neil Pionk played. And if you remember the first couple of games of the series, and I know Paul Maurice wants to throw away the regular season, but don't you remember in those first few games, Neil Pionk seemed to be like almost like a shadow of Connor McDavid. Whenever Connor McDavid was there, Neil Pionk was there. And they went away from that a little bit, and they went back to it tonight, and it was good. And I saw one of the guys, I think it was Jamie McLennan, was talking about how they're going to have to almost Esa-Tikkanen McDavid a little bit, and it's kind of the way they did it. Like Pionk was really physical with them. We saw that altercation, whatever you want to call it, after the first period where the teams came together and there was some not really significant action, but the point is that Neil Pionk was in Connor McDavid's face every opportunity he had, and they took away time and space. And again, that's what if you're the Jets, you have to do. You can't allow the Oilers to set up shop and have ownership of time and space. And they didn't let him do it. They forced him to make some plays. Second period wasn't great, but again, overall, he kind of got a chance to remove what the Oilers are really good at, and it allowed you to be opportunistic, and that's what I thought the Jets did.
You want a low-scoring game, right, boys? Like, we knew that without Ehlers and without Dubois, I mean, it was going to be tough for the Jets to win one of those kind of 4-3, 5-4 games, right? And I agree. And the save that stands out to me, guys, is the save on Ethan Bear that Hellebuyck made shortly before Toninato got the tip-in goal. He made a really solid save. Bear had a chance, and it was just like one of those point-blank saves, and Hellebuyck, that could have easily, gone the other way, and the Oilers could have had the 2-1 lead, right? And then obviously, the Scheifele, Connor Wheeler line, they get the empty net goals. But you're right, Dave. I mean, the second period was pretty one-sided, right? I think that the Jets only had one shot in the first 10 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, one or two shots. So obviously, the Oilers had quite the push early in the second period. And, I think the physicality and the way the Jets played defensively, they were talking about this. Kevin Bieksa was talking about this on the broadcast. Clearly, the Jets were, going back into a bit of a, prevent defense, right? Like you could tell that they were sacrificing offense and basically just trying not to give the Oilers anything in the neutral zone, give them no odd man rushes. And really, they didn't really give that many odd man rushes throughout the game. So overall, it was a pretty good defensive effort. It wasn't perfect, right, Dave? Like, there were points of that game where you would say, okay, well, especially when McDavid and Draisaitl were put together in that third period, there were some, moments in that game where you thought, okay, like here comes the push, they're going to tie this game up. But for the most part, Draisaitl had 4 shots. I thought he was dangerous all night long. Jesse Puljujarvi, we have to talk about as well. I mean, he was not just the goal, but he was dangerous all night long. But the Jets have Tucker Poolman now on that third pair with Logan Stanley, and obviously those guys are the top offensive defensemen in the NHL, right? Contributing on the score sheet. Obviously, I'm joking, but we know that Logan Stanley's got that shot, and Dave, you mentioned this many times towards the end of the regular season. Poolman is better suited in a third pairing role, and the results speak for themselves.
And I sorry, Drew, just quickly, I was going to say I went back and I looked at my notes because I was curious to see what that pairing of Stanley and Poolman had done previously, and someone tweeted at me saying they played 56 minutes together in the NHL, but they had 29 games as the first pairing for the Manitoba Moose in the 2018-19 season. And I think that I joked, I said, well, they'll have a lot of muscle memory. They'll have a lot of familiarity. They'll be okay. And again, I've always been a Poolman booster in the sense that I think Tucker Poolman is perfectly suited for a third pairing role. So if you put him there, you're giving him an opportunity to be successful. That's where he'll be able to do that. And again, I thought he was good. I thought, and especially considering he hasn't played in quite some time, and it was kind of a mystery, right? We didn't really know exactly what was going on with him, but there he is. He's back in, and again, I like that comfort that he and Logan Stanley have together, and it works, right? Like it worked well for the Jets. So I'm with you, as I thought it was a good opportunity to get those guys comfortable and feeling good about their game.
Well, and Drew, I know you want to get in here, but you saw that.
You guys, I might just go, have a snack or something. You guys are going right.
Yeah, have a snack, have a sandwich. But we talked about that. One of the reasons why we thought Poolman might be more successful, Dave, in that third pairing role, I should say, is because as opposed to maybe focusing a little bit more on the shutdown defense, his offensive game could flourish, right? And you saw it in the first period, right? Poolman had a really good chance in the first period, so it's not like it was just that goal where it wasn't just flashes. Like Poolman had a really good game. I think he really stood out. Same thing with Stanley, right? Like these guys aren't playing 25 minutes a night, but in a third pairing role, they were very solid against the Oilers. So the key thing here is you got the first win without Ehlers and Dubois. We don't know if they're going to be ready on Friday for game 2, but at this point, guys, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, everything that you had tonight. Look, you're not fielding, you're not icing your best lineup tonight. You get down early, or you give up the first goal. You don't get down early, but you get down early in the second period. You give up the first goal, and your offense is coming from unlikely sources. So this isn't the Jets, typical offensive, superstars. Forget about the fact that they scored into the empty nets, but I mean, you're getting Tucker Poolman gets the first goal because he's aggressive and he has a strong net drive, and Blake Wheeler, has a good shot on goal, but Mike Smith has to gather that rebound. That's a weak goal to let in by Mike Smith for the Oilers because the shot from Wheeler wasn't anything to write home about. That should be covered without a lot of difficulty.
It was a juicy rebound for sure.
It was a juicy rebound. And Poolman, in this instance, for a Jets team that often wasn't aggressive offensively, and that was clearly the strategy tonight, was certainly more to be more defensively conscious. In that time, it was good timing for Poolman to charge hard at that rebound, and he gets rewarded. So boom, second period, the Jets haven't played that well in the second period. They've given up the goal, and they get it back, and they get it back pretty quickly. And they get it back without having to change how they're playing. It's not like they have to alter their style, as and start sacrificing things defensively to get back into the game. They get a 5-on-5 goal, 1-1. Third period starts, that opening shift right off the third period. It's an offensive zone shift for the Jets top line against McDavid. And we know that entering tonight's game, mea culpa right up here. I was the one who said anytime that the Jets top line is against McDavid's top line, that's not a good matchup for the Jets. Well, today the Jets top line certainly was as decent against the McDavid line as you can expect. Now, I mean, if you look at the Corsi 4 in this game, it's tremendously one-sided. But Connor McDavid, in terms of shutting down Connor McDavid, this is as shut down as he has been all season long, and certainly by a Jets team that couldn't shut him down at all. But then what happens is Logan Stanley gets that very, it's just, we know what Logan Stanley is. He just loves to take shots. He'll take shots from anywhere. And this one, Dominic Toninato, veteran guy, biding his time, gets the stick, free, and has a tremendous tip in the high slot. And all of a sudden it's 2-1 for the Winnipeg Jets, despite the fact that I'm not going to say they haven't played well, because they did play pretty well. They executed the strategy that they needed to do in order to be competitive and in order to win this game. And what did we say on Saturday? We said on Saturday that the Jets' success is going to come down to attention to detail. And a moment ago, one of you, and I think it was you, as he said, was talking about the Oilers' odd man chances, odd man rushes. I don't think that I can't really think of any blatant odd man rushes off the top of my head. There certainly weren't any 2-on-1s for the Oilers tonight. The only 2-on-1 that I can really think of was by the Jets. The one towards the end of the first period where Scheifele rifled it high, and then the Connor sort of where it was almost a quasi breakaway, but then Connor tried to drop it back to Scheifele, but Darnell Nurse had come back on the back check. The Jets' attention to detail and execution of their game plan was as good tonight as we've seen in months for this team.
Sure, and I think you have to be concerned. You're right, and you have to be a little bit concerned about the lack of offense during portions of this game, right? Like we talked about the second period, and you're going to have to sacrifice that when you're playing an offensive team like Edmonton, right? Like we know, and specifically big guns, McDavid, Draisaitl, Kailer Yamamoto, like that's what is something that we talked about on the Saturday show. Like if you shut down McDavid, you have to deal with Draisaitl. If you shut down Draisaitl, you have to deal with Puljujarvi and Yamamoto, and like Alex Chiasson has been successful against the Jets this year. Like obviously Chiasson, guys, isn't a player you're going to game plan around, but the point is this Oilers team is good, right? And it's mainly because of McDavid and Draisaitl, but you have to give them credit. They have some good players, like even a guy like James Neal, Zach Kassian, like they were throwing their weight around. Like these are obviously, players that you don't expect to score on a nightly basis. But I agree with you. I mean, they did execute. The physicality was something I don't think we saw as much during the season. And obviously Logan Stanley helps. And, Adam Lowry is one of those guys that definitely stepped up big time physically. And, we had a commenter, Brent, talk about Vesalainen. I thought he had a really solid game. And like, that's another thing, right, guys? Going into this game, first off, we didn't necessarily a week ago expect Vesalainen to be in the starting lineup. He's on the second line. He didn't look out of place, right? Like he had a couple shots on net. He had a good scoring chance with Toninato in the first period, Dave. So, good for Vesalainen. And sure, if Dubois comes back or Ehlers comes back, there's a good chance that the first two guys that come out are Toninato and Vesalainen. But, give them credit here, right? Like Toninato doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. He has a few games with the Panthers. Also funny to note that he was picked, I think, 4 spots ahead of Hellebuck in that 2012 draft, Dave. Kind of funny how that works out, right? And they end up playing on the same team. But I think, the depth players, the guys that you didn't expect to really contribute at this time of the season, were contributing, and that's pretty awesome if you're the Jets without 2 of your top players in the top 6.
Well, as and I think it's what we've talked about throughout the course of the year is that you have to put players in the roles that they're best suited for. So Christian Vesalainen is better suited to be on a second line wing position because he's a scorer who's got a great shot and has a lot of talent. And so to me, he would be the type of player that you'd want to have in that elevated role. Do you have him on a fourth line checking role? Ideally, not really. I mean, that's a Dominic Toninato. Jansen Harkins, because of his ability, because of the way he processes the game, you can play him up and down the lineup. He's got that. He's a little more versatile. He's a little bit more like Andrew Kopp in that regard than a Christian Vesalainen. I'm not suggesting Vesalainen is one-dimensional because I think his game's been very good. I'm just thinking that, if you want to give him that opportunity for success, that's the role you want to find him in. So I mean, again, I liked his game. I thought he was, he's a young guy who there was a lot of pressure on him, right? Because a lot of people kind of wrote him off when he went back to Finland and then he came back. But Pascal Vincent will tell you, he came back with the right attitude and he adjusted to the North American game. And you see it in his game, right? You see that in a different style than what we saw previously. So Christian Vesalainen, again, is a player I like, in that elevated role as opposed to trying to stick him onto a fourth line and hope that he'll develop that checkers mentality. Again, we saw it, but now I'm self-conscious of saying "and again" because someone mentioned in the chat. They said, "What's the over under me saying "and again"?" And now I'm self-conscious of it. I said, now you're gonna make me self-conscious, and they did exactly that. You're in my head. Get out.
You're living rent-free between your ears there, Mr. Minuk. Good evening to everybody joining us. Welcome to the Illegal Curve post-game show. We're talking about the Winnipeg Jets 4-1 victory over the Edmonton Oilers in tonight's Game 1, Round 1 of the playoff series. A very impressive victory for the Winnipeg Jets, almost adopting a whole new style, a whole new approach in tonight's contest. This was a physical a physical game, and the Jets demonstrating a level of physicality that we have not seen from them at all this season. I mean, or even going back to last year, remember in the play-in series against the Calgary Flames, the Jets were sort of beat up and run out off the rink by the Flames. Not tonight. The Jets coming out very early, setting the tone with a lot of physicality that I thought carried over throughout the entirety of the game. And we talk again. We say it's a little bit of a broken record that what I sound like here. But on Saturday, what did we talk about? We're going to be the keys for the Winnipeg Jets. 5-man unit playing defense, and they certainly were that tonight. You saw forwards, really oftentimes the Jets had 3 forwards lined up at their own blue line to try and prevent the Oilers from gaining the zone with speed. And then we also had the attention to detail. This wasn't a game where the Jets, when they had to dumped it in such a manner that Mike Smith could get it up to the defenseman out of the zone before the Jets had a chance to establish any zone time. The dump-ins were smarter. Just the fine tuning of the Jets game was smarter tonight than we'd seen for a lot of weeks previously. And I do believe that an element of that had to do with the fact that it was clear they were going to be a playoff team, and the regular season sort of became a slog. Whereas now that it's playoffs and the stakes are even higher, they sort of were able to get back to those little things that they were doing right at the beginning of the year, at least in game 1 tonight against the Oilers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have some people in the chat talking about, how, Montreal was able to do that as well. Montreal's obviously got some physical players, but you're right, Drew. I mean, this is not a game plan that I think we've seen a lot from this Jets team, but it's something, and we saw it, it kind of tailed off, right, guys, in the second period. Like, there wasn't the same, I think the Jets had something like, 30 hits? Like, it was something ridiculous in that first period, and it was like something like 13 or 14 players, different players had hits in the first period, right? So, obviously, that's not sustainable. Kind of reminds you of when Team Canada would come out in the World Juniors, right? And everybody would just everybody was getting a hit in, right? So that that changed a little bit in the second period, and I think the Oilers adjusted, and you can tell that they were trying to work it down low a little bit more. And they obviously have players that can do that. And I talked about this earlier, but Draisaitl is one of those guys. It reminds me, guys, a lot of Crosby and Malkin, right? Like Crosby gets more of the headlines, but then you realize Malkin is also going to be a future Hall of Famer, right? Without Malkin, they wouldn't have won those 3 Stanley Cups.
Sorry, to continue on that analogy, though, Ezzy, where you mentioned sort of the Crosby Malkin, and Crosby, flashier than Malkin, McDavid flashier than Draisaitl. Draisaitl plays with that edge and that physicality to his game, and Malkin also, I mean, plays with an edge that you sort of goes unrealized because he's, he always puts up the big goal totals, the big point totals. Draisaitl, I mean, he's a big boy. I mean, you sort of forget how big Draisaitl is until there was that sequence where he fell on Neil Pionk, and I had to sort of go back and watch it on the replay there for a second. It almost like Pionk was enveloped by Draisaitl on the ice, because Draisaitl's what is he, 6'3", 6'4", something like that, and he's thick now, and so I think that aspect, and so when they fell over each other, it's sort of funny that he was lying on Pionk, and it's like, what happened to Neil Pionk there for a minute? But I think it goes to that sort of the physical nature. I wonder if the Oilers in game 2, when they look at their adjustments, are going to try and maybe match the Jets' physicality a little bit more, and try, because the Jets aren't a big team. Usually a lot of the guys who are throwing hits for the Jets are undersized. Neil Pionk, I mean, is not a big guy, but he plays a big style game. Though. He can certainly handle himself, no question. But I mean, go back. I mean, let's go rewatch, and I will obviously before Friday. Go rewatch the first 10 minutes of that game. The Jets hit absolutely everything that moved. And, I'm trying to think the last time we sort of saw a Jets team that hit everything like that is the first time they made the playoffs against the Anaheim Ducks. Remember that season, how physical the Jets were, where basically their entire MO was finishing every check. And it worked, obviously, until they ran into the Ducks and got swept out very quickly, very easily.
Well, those games were all close. I mean, they were in those games, if you remember.
They were in those games, absolutely. I mean, it
wasn't as if they got it wasn't like they were demolished 4-0 every single game.
No. Shout out to Emerson happening.
Yeah, remember it's not like what's happening to.
Yeah, you're right, Ezzy.
Well, wasn't that the overtime winner, or was that game 3 that he?
I thought it was game 4 that Edom scored that beautiful goal.
Yeah, I remember that the Jets
also
opened
shout
the
out
scoring.
to the party dangle.
Well, I was going to say Adam Party opened the scoring in that series for the Jets back in in Game 1 on the wraparound, walking down the boards against the Anaheim Ducks. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Oilers game tonight against the Jets, and it was just a complete team effort. Was much more reminiscent of the Jets from earlier this season. The Jets team that sort of had their identity and they had their the style of play that they needed to play in order to win, and they were able to recapture it tonight after really, to quote Paul Stastny, after cheating the game for so long at different points of time in the season, tonight they were able to get back to what made them successful earlier in the year.
Yeah, and again, that's one of those things that you needed to see from this Jets team. You needed to see what they were able to do against an Oilers team, right? You saw them against the Canucks, and you saw them against a Leafs team that didn't have Marner, didn't really necessarily want to, Austin Matthews, what did he play in that first period against the Jets? It wasn't exactly a playoff team that was looking like they were really ready to go all out and play a playoff game. That's what we saw tonight. That's what you were going to get. You're going to get an Edmonton Oilers team that wanted to have a good effort. Because remember, guys, what happened to the Oilers against Chicago last year?
Flamed out.
That's right. And Paul Maurice was asked about that. He was asked, I think Jeff Hamilton asked that question today in the morning availability. And he said, did you guys go back and watch to learn anything? Paul Maurice's point was that, there was very little value because his team was different. I'm like, well, the team's different, sure. But, a lot of the players are still the same. And, talking about that muscle memory between Logan Stanley and Tucker Poolman, this is an Oilers team that has a lot to prove. I mean, this is a team that when you lose the first game in your building, there's an advantage, I think, again, for the Jets to be able to have gone on the road and remove that element. I mean, you don't have the fans, so it's not the same pressure, but still, you're on the road, you get to be together as a team, and everyone expects you to get your ass kicked by the Oilers. And not everyone. I mean, Ezzy and I both picked the Jets to win this series, so it's not. We're not going to pretend like we're surprised. # no big deal. But the point is that. Sorry, Drew. But the point is that the pressure I thought actually was on especially without Nikolai Ehlers and Pierre-Luc Dubois. So when the Jets didn't have those two key elements in their lineup, I mean, how many people were saying the Jets are done? It's over. I mean, people tried to thread the line to be a little respectful. But the truth is, a lot of people were saying that this series was done because, to start the series off without two critical pieces put the Jets too far behind the eight ball.
The nobody believes in us factor. I think, and you sort of people and teams, I mean, the teams always tend to use it, and it can't always have no effect. So I do believe that, to your point there, Dave, that there is an element, and certainly we heard about it in the days leading up to this game from the different Jets, in the post-practice media availability, saying, don't look at the last month of our body of work as what we are as a team. Go back and look at the first month. Go look back and look at the first couple months. We're a pretty good hockey team, and everybody was, you've given up 400 goals to the Oilers, and McDavid can single-handedly, skate through the entire team while the Harlem Globetrotters song plays, things like that, because he had done it during the regular season. But I mean, it just goes back to, I think, what this season being such an anomaly, and it being so weird that the Jets, when they had their struggles and when they had their collapse, and when nothing was working for them on the ice, they still were able to look back. They still had something to fall back on, which was the success earlier in the year, and saying, look, this is more of a factor of just the compact schedule and the fact that we're just sort of slogging our way through it. And they were able to almost use that as motivation. And I don't think that the Oilers were arrogant coming into the game, because I don't think they took the Jets lightly, but I think the Oilers maybe had a little bit of a rude awakening as to the style that the Jets played tonight, and that the Jets weren't the pond hockey team that they'd been for so many games against the Oilers this season.
No, it's a good point, Drew. And I think there's way too much experience on this Jets team to let, those 7 losses in a row, or those, 9 losses out of 10, affect them going into the playoffs, right? Because most of these guys were together through that 2018 run, right? Like Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler, Morrissey, Hellebuck, like Lowry, Kopp, all of these guys. There's just way too much experience and talent on this team, right? Like it's not. The Jets were definitely fragile towards the end of the season. There's no doubt about that. But one win can really change the outlook. And obviously, guys, like there's a lot of hockey to be played here in the series. They don't give out the Stanley Cup, after night one. But obviously, stealing game one is huge. And I agree with Dave. Like all of the pressure is on Edmonton. And I think, even though you might look at the Jets as the huge underdog, which a lot of people, had them as a huge underdog going into this series, now all of the pressure's on Edmonton because, as you mentioned, Dave, Edmonton, Chicago last year, like that was a disaster. And even though most people kind of think when the Oilers have more salary cap in the offseason, that's when they're going to go out and maybe, acquire a big name defenseman. So it's not like the Oilers window closes if they get knocked out in the first round or the second round this year. But I think there is a lot of pressure on this team to go far. Drew's talked about this many times. When you have the top two scorers in the NHL year after year, and you're not able to do anything with it, the first round is not going to be good enough. Like this team wants to go further, whether that's the second round or, the Stanley Cup final. I think it's going to be a huge disappointment if you beat the Jets 7 times during the regular season and then you get knocked out in the first round. So obviously there's going to be a big pushback, guys. And we know that it's going to be tough to keep Connor McDavid off the score sheet 2 games in a row. But, the Jets did have a formula for success in this first game. And regardless if they get both Ehlers and Dubois or just one of them back, I think what we've seen is the Jets want to keep these games lower scoring. They want to keep them physical, and they want to make sure that, they're spending less time in their own zone. And aside from that second period where they were hemmed in a bunch of times early on in that second period, I think for the most part, it was a pretty smart game. Like it wasn't high event.
No,
and you'd like to see some more high danger chances. There's no doubt about that. But I think overall you have to be pretty happy because you not only did you get the win, but I think it was the manner in which you got the win that's the most important.
So what I was going to say, sorry, Drew, I just want to say quickly. So the Paul Maurice is, and we're going to play out his media availability is going on right now. And he said that for folks asking about Dominic Toninato, he said his assistants pushed harder for Toninato to play tonight, felt he was best equipped to play the style of game that was necessary. And then he added, they were right. So it's interesting that and that's not a slight against Jansen Harkins because we know that Jansen Harkins looked pretty good against the Calgary Flames in game 1 of the bubble last year. But that's an interesting tidbit from Paul Maurice in terms of the thought process in going with Dominic Toninato in the lineup tonight. And look, this isn't, as he said it right. The series isn't over because the Jets won. But it's always better to be up 1-0 than to be down 1-0 and nervous because if the Jets can go into Edmonton or stay in Edmonton because they're not leaving, but if they can stay in Edmonton and they can come out with a 2-0 advantage, I mean that's pretty significant. And look, we joke for those who are of a certain vintage of the history of the Smythe division, but none of these players like that doesn't apply anymore. I mean,
they were born decades after.
Yeah.
That.
So I mean, like, we reference it and stuff like that. I mean, it's not really there's no real like linkage between that, even over and above the fact. Again,
even Nate Thompson, Dave, I think he was like 4 years old when Dave Ellett scored that goal.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's not really that linkage. You don't have to sit there and go, well, this is what happened back in the day. This is a different era, a different situation. But I like I said, I think it was a positive start because you did a bunch of things that you needed to do, and you from the start. I think Drew said it right. The way the Jets started that game was the way they needed to. They came out and they didn't allow Dave Tippett because Dave Tippett's a great coach. Dave Tippett is a very methodical coach, and I thought that they really didn't allow him to hem them in, and because the Jets played a different style than what we've seen from them traditionally. And I thought they were more responsible. Not always. I mean, there were obviously instances where there were breakdowns, but again,
the Oilers didn't have a shot on net through the first 8 minutes of the game.
There you go.
Or 7 minutes, whatever
it was. Yeah. But I mean, I know, then that's my point, is that I thought the Jets came out the way they needed to, and that allowed them to set a tempo. And even though you're going to get a pushback because the Oilers are a good team and are able to do that with the players that they've got, the Jets were able to reestablish it a bit. And once Tucker Pullman tied that game, what a momentum change. Right? It was like you really felt, because if you're the Jets and you're playing a slightly different style or maybe a completely different style from what you've traditionally done, and the other team scores, and now you're down, and now you're chasing. Well, the default tends to be to go back to what you're used to try and chase the game. But the Jets kind of stayed within that framework, I thought, and it allowed them to tie the game. And, I thought the guys on the broadcast did a good job in between periods breaking down the error on, between Kulikov and who's the other defenseman with Kulikov? Larson. And on the Pullman goal. But that was an instance where, the Jets were able to be rewarded sticking within the framework of what they were doing, and then they could keep it going. So there's that, going back to the first year psychology, behavior modification, positive reinforcement element of things. Pavlov's, with bell going off, the Jets got rewarded, and you end up with the game 1 victory, and we'll see if you can bring more of the same. And again, we don't know what's going to happen with the lineup, right? We don't know what Nikolai Ehlers' status is going to be. We don't know what Pierre-Luc Dubois' status is going to be. So there's still some questions coming into Friday night's game, but you put yourself into a good situation.
You've certainly put yourself into a good position, and you've sort of switched where the pressure now lies. This is a Jets team that, given the lineup deficiencies, probably was able to play sort of free and clear today, in the sense that if they lose tonight's game, assume that assume it's a close game and they lose, they can say, well, we did a lot of good things, but they would never admit it publicly, but we're without two very key elements to the team. Instead, what happens is they get the win. They do a lot of very good things, and they might get reinforcements afterwards. So now, the pressure certainly shifts from the Jets to the Edmonton Oilers. Again, the goaltending situation. It's not like Mike Smith was bad tonight for the Oilers.
No, he was fine.
He was fine, but where they needed him to make saves, because it's not like the Jets had ample opportunities. He can't give up that rebound. So, that was a bad rebound to give up.
There were only 2 goals, obviously, but Toninado's goal was just a nice tip, right? Like,
you can't blame him for that.
You're not going to fault Smith on that. And, we talked about this as well throughout the regular season, right? Like, Smith, even if you try to keep the puck away from him, right? Dump it in the corners, just keep it away from him. He's still going to play the puck. And I as a, Marty Brodeur enthusiast, I love watching Smith because there aren't that many goalies like Pekka Rinne, even though Rinne's not even starting for Nashville now, but you know what I mean, right, Drew?
Yes.
I just love watching Smith play the puck. So you could tell that they were trying to keep the puck away from him as much as possible, but it was just, as you said, it was a game plan that was executed. And, I know that, you have concerns about, some of the scoring chances that you gave up maybe, but they weren't odd man rushes. Like this game that they played defensively was pretty solid. Again, it wasn't perfect. And, the Jets are not going to be mistaken for, the New York Islanders or some of the better defensive teams in the league, Carolina. But when you keep McDavid off the score sheet, when you keep, Draisaitl off the score sheet, and you steal game 1, you're going to be pretty happy with that. So obviously they'll work on some things, between now and Friday, and hopefully they'll get Ehlers or Dubois back, or hopefully both. We don't know. But I think overall, that game, when you write it up and you want it to go a certain way, that, it was pretty close to as good as it could get in game 1 on the road.
Well, look, I'm looking at the courtesy natural stat trick, looking at the 5-on-5 high danger chances. It was 13-8 for the Oilers. But as we just talked about, and as you mentioned there, Ezzy, of those 13 high danger chances for the Oilers, they weren't off the rush for the most part. They weren't odd man rushes. They maybe had some chances or some high danger chances after, grinding the puck down low or whatever, maybe a goal mouth scramble. You think the Oilers goal, the Puljujarvi goal, it's sort of a fluke one that the shot, by, I think it was Tyson Barrie who shot it, if I recall correctly, doesn't get all the way through, and it just sort of bounces onto Puljujarvi's stick. So, that could have just as easily bounced onto a Jets player stick or bounced harmlessly into the corner. So from the Jets defensive strategy perspective, to be able to limit the Oilers off the rush, because that's where they do their most damage. I know you got out-Corsied badly, the Jets did. I know the Jets lost the high danger chances battle 13-8, according to the numbers that I'm looking at here. The Jets, given that they have Connor Hellebuyck in net, so assume Hellebuyck outplays Smith, as he usually is going to do, and the Jets, despite having 5 fewer high danger chances, they're more opportunistic, like they were tonight. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the Oilers' high danger chances not being off the rush plus the Hellebuck factor versus Smith gives the Jets not an advantage, but it gives them a pathway and a game plan to victory on a night in, night out basis. The Jets know that if it's going to be trading chances back and forth, they're not going to be able to beat the Oilers because that's playing right into McDavid and Draisaitl on what they do best. But if you keep them from being able to gain the zone with speed, and you take care of your attention to detail in your own zone that way, then you might have an opportunity, and then you can transition and you can be opportunistic when the Jets have a chance, despite having fewer quote unquote high danger chances than the Oilers.
Yeah, Drew, you would rather them beat you with those high-low plays, right? Or you'd rather beat you with the point shots and with traffic in front, as opposed to giving up breakaways to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and their speed and physicality more so with Draisaitl obviously was noticeable. And we talked about Puljujarvi, like he had some good scoring chances in addition to the goal that he scored. So you know that the Oilers are going to get scoring chances, but it's what types of scoring chances they get, like you said, which is the most important. And you're right, transition, scoring off the rush. I mean, the Jets are obviously a team that also likes to play like that, but they know if they open it up too much, it's not just going back and forth, but it's giving up those kind of turnovers, right? And that's something that we saw quite a bit between the Jets and the Oilers, those turnovers, right, in the offensive zone. So it's like we talked about earlier, guys, like, this was a pretty impressive victory. Like you said, Drew, when you go into this game without 1/3 of your top six, and you've already lost 7 of the 9 games. And again, that is significant here. You can't minimize that. Like the Oilers, we talked about it. Connor McDavid had 22 points in 10 games, and you completely shut him out. Yeah, he had a couple good scoring chances, and he looked dangerous on the power play. And it was only 1 power play, but at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The W for win and 0 for points.
That and that's you talk about Connor McDavid and how he looked. Like you said, he's always going to have his chances, but that is as mitigated as we've seen Connor McDavid, certainly by the Jets this year, no question, obviously, given how he torched the team night in and night out. But just the Jets had a good game plan against. I thought Draisaitl was more dangerous than McDavid for the most part. So, I think that's a good game plan for the Jets. Now, can they recreate it? Can they keep that attention to detail, Dave, for Friday's game 2? That is sort of obviously the significant question we'll have to find out. I mean, I look back last year to what happened to the Oilers and the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks won game 1 6-4 in the qualification round. The Oilers came back and won 6-3 in game 2. And obviously we know the Blackhawks won game 3 and 4, but the Oilers did bounce back after losing game 1 in the play-in round back in August. So it's going to be very interesting from my perspective to see what kind of Oilers response you're going to see on Friday and how the Jets can respond to the Oilers' response. What do the Jets?
How are the Oilers going to respond to the Jets' response to the Oilers' response? Though I think that's the big question.
No, and I think I think it's a fair point, Drew. But I think if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you don't worry about what the Oilers are planning on doing. You just do what you did tonight. I mean, you want to talk about a game plan or a blueprint. You created a blueprint for success. Playoff hockey is different hockey, and we know that. You're not sitting there trading chances, playing fire wagon hockey where although it's funny because I was watching, I think Joe Pascucci put out the 1990 Jets Oilers 7-5 game. So I was watching those highlights. That was some trading chances right there. There was some classic.
Yeah, that was 1980s hockey in a nutshell.
Yeah, 1990. But it was.
Sorry, shout out to Mo Mantha.
Yeah, Mo Mantha had himself a game, but I think it was Pat Olenek too. I think, but the point is that Thomas Dean.
You interrupting yourself now, Dave?
Yeah, I am. I'm excited. I'm excited to think about all those names. But no, I really do think that you've created something. You have an opportunity, and maybe Paul Maurice has been moving his group towards this, and this has kind of been the game plan with the team because we knew that you can't play loose hockey and expect to win. You can't play loose against Connor McDavid. And it's I mean, we did the Moose end of season thing yesterday. Had to get that in, and on our YouTube channel, you can watch it anytime you want. No big deal. But the point is that What?
I was going to say, is it also on our website? You can give the website a plug while you're
It's
at it.
also on our website, illegalcurve.com. No big deal. Craig Heisinger, Pascal Vincent, Jets 2017 second round pick, Dylan Sandberg, Jets 2017 third round pick, Johnny Kovacevic, and Jeff Malad, rookie, came out of nowhere, Cornell, but had a good impact. All these guys were rolling along.
Hey, don't forget about Thinker and the Goose.
Well, of course, Austin and Daniel were on, and we were rolling along. And I just got so excited about my Moose point. I actually forgot the point I was just I got so excited to mention the Moose thing. I forgot about the point I was trying to make. Oh, well, whatever. Anyways, someone else take over. I'm passing the baton. I got too excited.
I'll tell you what, Dave's getting a little excited, so let's all take a deep breath. We still got lots more to come here on the Illegal Curve post game show. We'll run some ads, we'll pay some bills, much more to come.
Smash the like button. Smash the like.
Exactly. Smash the like button. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe, get alerted each and every time we go live here with the Illegal Curve post-game show. So everybody hang tight. We'll be right back. Much more Jets talk. The Jets victors, game 1, 4-1 victors over the Edmonton Oilers. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. This is the Illegal Curve post-game show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We're back with the Illegal Curve post-game show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on a Wednesday evening. Ezzy's already chuckling to himself. What's so funny there, big boy?
Dave and I are having a little side chat here on the old texter machine. So
fair enough.
Something I'll try to keep it together though, Drew.
Try and be professional. That's all we ever ask from you, or at least your version of professionalism, whatever that might actually be, but that's okay. Anyways, the Jets 4-1 victors tonight over the Edmonton Oilers. The Jets goal scorers, in case you're just joining us, in case you happen to miss the game tonight, the Oilers opened the scoring. It was Jesse Puljujarvi getting the goal in the second period after a scoreless first period for both teams. The Jets were able to respond a couple of minutes later, just under 3 minutes later. Tucker Poolman, his first of the playoffs, his first of the season.
Whoa.
I'm not quite sure why you have a University of North Dakota Poolman jersey, but anyways, that seems like a good purchase. At least for today, it was a good purchase.
Wait, how do we know it's not a Colton Poolman jersey? And as you're muted.
Thank you.
But how do we know that's not a Colton Poolman jersey?
Or why do you have a Tucker Poolman UND jersey?
Because I'm a big Tucker Pullman fan, and you guys know I go down to UND. Well, not this year because of COVID, but our good friend Kyle Kozier, I stay with him and usually go to at least one UND game per year. So I picked up a jersey, and then I was like, maybe I'll put Pullman on the back because he was a Jet. I've had this jersey for I think 5 years, so he wasn't even playing pro yet. He was still with UND. But what's interesting about this jersey is that they didn't have a nickname, if you remember, right? Because they were Fighting Sioux and then Fighting Hawk. So when I bought this jersey, it was just North Dakota, not Fighting Hawk. So big UND fan. Come on. I almost went to law school, Drew, and then obviously I didn't get in because my grades weren't good enough. But
I was going to say, define almost. Yeah, define almost.
It worked out for one of us, right?
Who's the one?
Richie.
I know. I wanted to make sure that everyone knew it wasn't you. Anyways, Tucker Pullman getting his first, not only of the playoffs,
Richie, right?
His first of the season at the 11:01 mark of the second period. That tied it up at 1-1. That's how it ended.
Drew,
after 20 minutes, after 40 minutes.
His first playoff goal since he was with the Omaha Lancers in the USHL.
Wow, there you go. Look, going deep. I saw a stat earlier tonight I couldn't believe that Alex Ovechkin does not have an overtime winner in his career.
I saw
in
that
the playoffs.
Too. Yeah.
Did that not strike you as like this is a guy who's got 70 playoff goals in his career and not one overtime winner?
I can tell you what he was. Very angry at his goaltender tonight.
He was very angry at his goaltender tonight.
No, I agree with you, Drew, because he has a really good shot, as you guys know, of passing Gretzky 894, right? He's definitely going to hit 800, and he's going to get very close. We obviously don't know. He's got to probably average, 30 to 35 goals for another 4 or 5 years, right? But yeah, it is surprising. And you remember because early in his career they were just dominated. They could never get past Pittsburgh, right?
Mm-hmm. It just goes to show you that whoever scores in overtime is very random. There's clearly no rhyme or reason to it. If a guy like Ovechkin only does not have a career overtime winner in the playoffs, it was 1-1 after 40 minutes. As I said, Dominic Toninato. The Jets goal scorers. First it's Pullman, then the game-winning goal off the stick
Minnesota Mafia
of Dominic Toninato.
I can't show you guys a Toninato Minnesota Duluth jersey. Sorry.
Oh, come on. And you call yourself a professional. Nobody calls you a professional. Logan Stanley gets the assist on the Toninato goal. Stanley with the shot from the point. Toninato with the tip. At first, the play went back up the ice. Nobody knew it was in. And then once you hear the horn where they blow the play dead, you know that it's a goal for the Jets. And that's what led to the celebrations. If you actually go back and look at the replay, after Toninato's tip, and when everyone else started skating back the other way, he had his arms up. He thought he scored, and he turned out to be correct in that, and it ends up being the game-winning goal. Kyle Connor and Blake Wheeler both score into empty nets as well to ice the victory for the Jets, the 4-1 win. You didn't even get to the point. Sure, the Oilers sort of pushed, but you never really even got to the point where the Jets were desperate in their own zone because the Oilers really looked discombobulated a little bit. After Smith went to the bench for the extra skater, the Jets just sort of took the puck, and Kyle Connor had a pretty easy shot into the net. He's not going to miss that opportunity, and the Oilers didn't even have an opportunity to gain the zone or establish any possession in the Jets zone, trying to find the equalizer. The Jets really did a very good job all night long, stacking up at their own blue line to prevent the Oilers from being able to get clean zone entries, easy zone entries. The power play notwithstanding, because the Oilers get the easiest zone entries on the power play, I think, in the entire NHL.
Well, that power play is just fun to watch, right? The skill there, and
unless you're defending it.
Yeah, well, the Jets were glad to only give up one of them. That's for sure.
Right. It kind of reminds you a little bit of Tampa Bay, right? It's just pick your weapon that you like. Obviously McDavid and Draisaitl, but Tyson Barrie has just absolutely racked up the points this year. He's made himself a lot of money. It's not really known whether or not he's going to return to Edmonton, but he's probably going to triple his salary because I think he only made $2 million this year, right, guys? So, there's just so many dangerous options for the Oilers, and it's not like the Jets don't have a good power play. They just didn't get to use it tonight, right? So, yeah, I agree with you, Drew. You're talking about stacking, and they were just generally cleaner in their approach through the neutral zone. Like there's, you often talk about the 1-3-1 and everything like that. Like all teams in the NHL play a variation of that. And clearly the Jets were sitting back a little bit and not maybe being as aggressive as they have been. And part of that is you don't have Ehlers and Dubois in your lineup. But I think a lot of that, more of it, Dave, has to do with the fact that you just can't give a player like Connor McDavid, a guy who plays, let's be honest, more than 99% of the rest of the league. Like he's not a guy that's going to take a 30-second shift, right? Like he's going to take a longer shift than your average forward. And you just, and why I bring that up is because that, he might not get going in the neutral zone or in his own zone and beat you, the first time around, but you always have to worry about him. There's a reason why, he's called a cheat code, because he just, he can just accelerate from standing and just beat you with speed. It doesn't matter really, who's out there. And not just the speed, obviously, it's the combination, it's the hands as well. So yeah, overall, I think you have to give the Jets a lot of credit for how they played defensively. Like we talked about it, at the end of the day, they put up, the Oilers put up 35, 36 shots, whatever it was. But a lot of those shots were not of the high danger, variety, especially in the first period. They had 6 shots on net. And only 1 shot through the first, whatever it was, 8 or 9 minutes of the game. So you have to be pretty happy with how you played. The one thing that I'm the most concerned about probably is you didn't see, like, Scheifele, Connor Wheeler, they had a solid game. Stastny also had a really solid defensive game, but
defensively
you
he
can't
was very
really
sharp.
pick out one line, guys, and say that line was really dangerous offensively, and that can't continue. You might be able to win a game, Dave, or a couple games, but you're going to have to turn it up a little bit offensively as this series progresses.
But hang on though, Ezzy. I agree.
You can't win every game 2-1, Drew.
Well, I agree to an extent, because if the Jets open it up too much, if they start sacrificing defense for offense, they're definitely not going to win. That's not a win. That's not a trade that they can make and expect to be successful on. I do think that their approach needs to be defense first. Now, if they were to go defense first and that get behind by a goal or 2 goals, then obviously you have to change your approach. But for Friday's game 2, I would expect that the strategy for the Jets is still very similar, despite the fact that I agree, the offense, look, you get the Tucker Pool. You're not going to expect Tucker Poolman to score, a goal like that. You're not going to expect Dominic Toninato to score a goal like that again either. I mean, if that's all these guys scored in the entirety of the series, then you're fine with that, because you don't expect anything from them offensively. You can't all of a sudden start, getting your high danger chances. I see, Energy Design 21 over here is talking about high danger chances, as we mentioned before. The Jets can't all of a sudden get their high danger chances up at 15 for the game if that means the Oilers' high danger chances are going to be up at 25. You just can't sacrifice the defensive side for the offense that much. For the Jets to be successful, they're going to have to grind it out. They're going to have to win these low scoring 2-1 games and rely on Connor Hellebuyck to be better than Mike Smith like he was tonight.
I mean, I think we said it, or I said it earlier, and Matt, I agree with Matt. They created a blueprint. I mean, you don't say, well, we were successful, let's go away from what we just did to win the game. I agree with Ezzy. You have to have some offense, of course, but if you're the Jets and you think to yourself, you didn't have Nikolai Ehlers, who we all agree is the most dynamic player on this Jets team, and you don't have Pierre-Luc Dubois, who is a playoff, I don't want to say monster, but he did very well in the playoffs against the Toronto Maple Leafs last year, which is what obviously a lot of people are hoping he would do for the Winnipeg Jets. So if you're missing 2 players who are key elements, as you guys said, 2 of your top 6 guys, but you've created a blueprint with which you were able to have success, and you had guys who bought in, and everyone seemed to play that style successfully. Wait for your opportunities, and then when you do get them, take advantage. I wouldn't go and reinvent the wheel, because the Jets have the Jets have flaws in their game. I'm not here to point out all of them, but the point is you found something that allowed you to gain an edge on a team that you had no edge against all year. As he said, Connor McDavid, 22 points in 10 games against the Winnipeg Jets, right?
9 games.
Sorry, 9 games. Well, as he said 10, but it was 9. So 9 games.
I added a game in there.
Yeah, there you go. But it was 7
I
goals.
need some Fireball, Dave.
We'll get you some. There's we'll ask the folks at Seagram's. We'll get you some of that Fireball. But the point is, you did something against a guy that you haven't been able to do the entire season. Think about that. This is a guy who is the super freak, the guy who was able to do to the north. And Paul Maurice talked about this today in his availability. He was asked about what I don't remember which reporter. I don't remember who asked the question, but that idea of going back. Because when I looked at McDavid's year, because I was curious to see some of the numbers for him, I think the Habs and the Flames were the only 2 teams that had in 3 of their games had shut him out and had him. Now he got points against them still, but they had 3 games against him each where he was held off the score sheet. So, and Paul Maurice said, they went and they looked at the teams that were successful against McDavid. What did they do? So he obviously watched what the Flames did. He obviously watched, and I watched one Calgary Edmonton game this season, and Calgary hit McDavid a lot. They didn't give him that time and space. What I said at the beginning of this show, I stick to. I think Neil Pionk is such a good, offset for Connor McDavid. He just seemed to be in his face so much and under his skin. And just, there was that one play, I don't remember if it was in the first or second, where he finished the check on McDavid and then just stuck with him and didn't allow McDavid to kind of set up and get some space. And that to me is what the Jets needed to do. So if I'm the Jets, and again, we don't know what the lineup's going to look like on Friday, but if you're the Jets, you don't really deviate significantly from what brought you success.
Certainly on the defensive approach. And now if you were able to get a guy like Ehlers back in the lineup on Friday, I mean, Ehlers is, as you said, Dave, he's the Jets' most dynamic player. I don't know that he's not the Jets' best goal scorer. That's still Kyle Connor. But if you had to say, in a one-on-one battle, who's the most dynamic, it would be Nikolai Ehlers for the Jets. If they're able to get him back in the lineup, then he just adds another element. He adds maybe that offensive element you were talking about, Ezzy, where he can single-handedly or, flip the ice. If the Jets are hemmed in their own zone, Nikolai Ehlers, he gains some speed, whatever might happen, to get the puck out of their own zone. And he can do that, just carry it where the Jets don't have a lot of guys who can just carry the puck out of trouble. So if all of a sudden you get Nikolai Ehlers back and you add his offensive element and his offensive skill set, but at the same time you keep your same defensive mindset and you keep your same defensive responsibility, well, that is certainly a exciting addition to the Winnipeg Jets approach to the game. Now, I don't know that Nikolai Ehlers is going to play on Friday. If I was a betting man right now, I would say
the Jets know either, Drew.
I don't think the Jets know either. I agree. I think that Ehlers, my hunch right now, and this is strictly me with a hunch, is that Ehlers will be in the lineup before Dubois, simply because obviously Dubois is the first time we've seen him back on the ice since that game against Toronto, the last regular season game where he got injured. So I would not be surprised if Ehlers is back in the lineup for Friday's game. I would be surprised if Dubois is back, but we'll see obviously tomorrow. The team planning on practicing sometime in the sort of late morning, if I'm not mistaken. Dave, you would know better than I would off the top of your head what time. I think it's maybe 12:30 Central Time, 11:30 Mountain tomorrow for the practice, something like that.
I was going to say that the problem is I always get the Mountain Time wrong. Even today I had it wrong. I'm not entirely certain here. I'm looking at it right now to find out. I'll give you the
Arizona always screws me up, right? Because part of it is mountain.
It's 12 p.m. 12 p.m. Mountain Time, so 1 p.m. here.
1 p.m. our time. So then you'll have a better idea about the Jets, any potential additions to the Jets roster. Anybody, of course, who's banged up in tonight's game, because there were a number of Dylan DeMello got absolutely run over by Josh Archibald. That was in the first period. So I think a lot of people were holding their breath that maybe Dylan DeMello might not necessarily be able to bounce back and rejoin the game as quickly as he did. And obviously he looked fine for the rest of the game, but who knows what the adrenaline wears off. Who knows how he's actually going to feel tomorrow. But, that was certainly a big hit. There was a physical game. I mean, Josh Morrissey blocked a shot, if I recall correctly, with off his foot, maybe at a point during the game. And he was sort of slow to get to the bench, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously you have no idea what the injuries, what the effect of any of a more physical game could have on the Jets lineup ahead of Game 2 on Friday night. But they're certainly feeling good about themselves, having won Game 1 and having done so with a pretty good third period effort. I mean, really, the first 10 minutes of that third period, right from that first shift in the third period, the Jets were the better team, and they eventually got what turned out to be the game-winning goal off the Toninato tip. Say that 10 times fast, by the way.
Right, and exactly. And when you go back to your previous comment about Ehlers, it allows you to be more aggressive, right? And having Dubois helps as well, but because of Ehlers' speed, because of what he's able to do offensively, he's able to basically circle back and do circles in the offensive zone. And that goes back to what I was saying before about how many offensive chances the Jets had, and obviously I'm not suggesting, guys, that the Jets are going to change their approach, because why would you? It was successful in Game 1. I'm just saying that I don't know how sustainable it is in a 7-game series when you have that much of a game in which you weren't generating enough offensively. That's all I'm saying. Like, at a certain point, if the Jets are going to win this series, Scheifele, Connor, and Wheeler are going to have to be more of a factor. And I'm not talking, the empty net goals to me don't count. Like, I'm talking about throughout the course of the game. And obviously, they were pretty solid, and Wheeler factored in big time on the Tucker Poolman goal, Dave. But what I'm talking about is, aside from that first period, and we haven't really talked a lot about the third line, and I thought Appleton had a solid game, Lowry solid game. Obviously those guys weren't needed too much on special teams, but you're going to have a little bit more sustained pressure. Like, you're going to have the first line has a good shift, and that's followed up by the Stastny line having a good shift, and then Kopp, Lowry, Appleton, or Lowry, Appleton, Perreault, they come out and they have a solid shift. That's what you have to see if the Jets are going to win this series. Yes, it worked for one game, but I don't think you're going to necessarily be able to get away with low event hockey like we saw for a big part of this game.
I do have to offer I made an error. I said this was Tucker Poolman's first goal since his days with the Omaha Lancers of the USHL. But our good friend Brad Elliott Schlossman of the Grand Forks Herald, who I should have known to ask beforehand, he came in with a correction. He told me that Tucker scored in the 2016 NCAA first round game against Northeastern in Cincinnati. So I was incorrect.
How did you forget about that, Dave?
I wasn't watching that game.
We all remember that. Drew remembered that. We were talking about that before the game. Come on.
But
didn't we do a post-game show after that?
Yeah, we did. We did an hour post-game show just about the Tucker Poolman goal.
Yeah. Well, we're doing an hour plus post-game show about tonight's Tucker Poolman goal. An hour and 7 minutes so far. We'll keep it going. Wednesday evening. Nice to see so many of you. This is the Illegal Curve post-game show. If you're just joining us, we go live after each and every Winnipeg Jets game, regular season game, and of course now into the playoffs. And so Friday night we'll be back here right around the same time, about 10.
By the way, what happens if there's overtime? Dear mama.
Well, if there's going to be overtime, hope there's no overtime on Monday, because Monday's a late game.
But Drew, Friday we might be going right into our Saturday show.
That's true.
There's a lot of
overtimes.
That would be an icy first if we just rolled the post game show into the Saturday show.
Interesting happenings. You're going to hear about this. Nazem Kadri. He just absolutely knocked Justin Falk out with a hit to the head. He's going to get suspended because it's the playoffs, and Nazem Kadri loves getting suspended in the playoffs. An absolutely dirty blindside hit. It looks like it's a 5-minute major and a match penalty, if I'm seeing that correctly, for Nazem Kadri for a hit on Justin Falk. So Kadri just can't help but hurting his own team come playoff time.
I heard he knocked the Falk out of him.
Might not matter though, because the Avalanche might sweep that series.
They are, but I mean, Justin Falk this is a bad hit. I mean, this is a
Drew. What are you watching? Really bad hit. What are you watching a bad hit for? You should be paying attention.
Put it up on the screen, Drew. Nobody can see it.
No, we don't want
I could screen share it, but I'm not sure if we're violating any YouTube rules at that point.
I just watched it. It's pretty bad.
We don't want to need to do that. This is a Jets.
That's 2 games minimum, maybe 3.
Well, he's got a history, of course, so that'll be interesting and something to look for after our post-game show comes to a conclusion. You can, if you want, you can watch Nazem Kadri being stupid yet again. Again, this is from my perspective, a very good night for the Winnipeg Jets. The numbers.
They won the game, didn't they? Win the game, Drew? Wouldn't that mean
they did win the game? Well, there's our buddy Scotty Billick joining us in the chat room now. I'm not sure which one of us he's saying a solid shirt.
You said you got it from the Bay, right? Did you buy it though during Bay Days? Like, did you get a nice little deal?
I'm not made of Ginsburg money. I only buy things during Bay Days. Come on, I can't buy off the rack. This is I can only afford.
I have absolutely no money.
Hey, he's just here.
Scotty Billick. I like it.
Well, somebody send Scotty the link. He can jump on with us if he wants.
I'll send Scotty.
I just look. If somebody's going to look at these numbers after tonight's game and say, how did the Jets win? You're going to look at the advanced stats. You're going to look at the analytics, and you're going to say, well, this was as one-sided as one-sided can be. And I think that would be a misleading way of looking at the game. Yes, the Jets absolutely got dominated analytics-wise, but this is how the Jets win games. They're opportunistic. They don't, win the possession battle very often, if ever. I mean, how many games this year did the Jets win the possession battle? How many games this year did the Jets have, more high danger chances than their opponents? Probably more often than not, they didn't. They're opportunistic. They were opportunistic tonight. They relied on good goaltending. Normally, they rely on a good power play. Clearly, that wasn't an issue tonight because they didn't even have one power play opportunity at all. So again, this is the Jets winning on their terms, winning in how they want to see the game. And anytime that you can dictate to your opponent how the game is played, I think you're usually in a pretty good position. And that is what happened for the Winnipeg Jets, I think, in tonight's contest. This would be where one of you talks.
I'm sending Scotty Billick the link here. So
I already sent him the link. Okay,
let's get Scott in here then. He's hosting the Ken Rennie post-game show too, so he's going to be doing double duty.
By the way, Scott, what's the whole thing with flute? What does flute mean? Sorry, just so people know, Scott Billick of the Winnipeg Sun now joining the show. Drew, I stole your line. What's with this flute? What's with this flute thing? I saw it on the yesterday's playoff preview. So explain to people who don't know what the hell that means.
It's this. I'm getting ready for Kenny and Ray. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Wait, you're doing double duty? You're going to be on our show and you're going to do Kenny and Ray?
Well, apparently. I just tuned in to chirp you guys in the chat, but apparently you guys want me on the show. Comment. I won't say anything. I think Harry Rosen is like a Jewish store, and I don't mean that as a bad joke or anything. So I just want to make sure.
Can we remove Scotty from the?
Don't clip that. Nobody clip that.
Well, it might be.
That's going to replace the Kenny GIF.
I can afford it.
So this is the flute.
What's in that flute right now, Scott?
This is just water. Honestly, I have a Brita right next to it. If that was vodka, I'd be making a lot more money than I do. So
I was going to say, Scotty, I was hoping that was Grey Goose.
That would be fantastic at this point.
So, Scotty, what did you think of tonight's contest? Getting it back to the hockey game that we witnessed. I mean, we've been talking about the Jets' attention to detail as a big factor in tonight's victory, and the fact that they were, the 5-man unit. And I know it's a cliche and all, but I mean, it really was. That's how the Jets have to win, and that's how the Jets have to neutralize Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And I thought they did a pretty good job tonight, and were rewarded with the victory as a result.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The Jets were outchanced nearly 2-1, or I think 2-1, and out-attempted almost 2-1 tonight. Mm-hmm. And they won a game, right? But this is, the Jets aren't often going to win games by doing the opposite to teams, right? Like, this is their game. They take a little bit of a beating, and we saw that in the second period, right? So they take that beating, they get down a goal. I mean, I thought just like there was a lot of turnovers in that second period. I love the chat, man. I can't get it. Anyways.
Scott, that's why we love this new format.
I know, it's fantastic.
It's
honestly, like real time.
No, there's, like I say to the guys consistently, probably at least once a week, that there's Wait, are we getting Sean Reynolds is joining now? What is going on?
I heard Sean was coming into the show.
It's pandemonium. I didn't know Sean was joining the show.
I told Sean that he was welcome to join us because there's a gap between when Kenny and Rennie can start tonight because Ken is writing. He's on deadline until I think 12:30 tonight.
Yeah.
So I said to Sean that if he wants to join us, he's more than welcome. So I had sent him the link, and I guess he's it looks like he says
5 people in here at once.
Yeah, we can get up to 10 people in there, I believe. But it looks like his camera is not connected
hold
properly.
On.
So
I'll get him in here.
Crowded here.
Oh,
there we go.
Hey, gentlemen.
I'm not cheating on you, Sean. I'm not cheating on you. Don't worry.
Now it's
I showed up. I look and I'm thinking, what is going on, Billick? The look on your face was like, oh no, where's the back door on this place?
But anyways, I'll finish my thought just so I can before.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this team played the game that it normally plays, and Sean might suggest differently. I think the difference tonight was they were very disciplined. I think that was huge. I mean, they got blown up on the power play during the regular season. Mind you, Connor McDavid never scored a power play goal against the Jets, but he had 6 assists. So, I mean, as good as a goal, right? I think part of the issue going forward, and Paul Maurice alluded to it in his post-game comments, there was caveats. He says they felt that they played a good game, but there was some caveats, right? And to me, those caveats were the fact that they got out-attempted 2-1, nearly outshot or whatever, anything like, and he didn't think it was a highly physical game. I thought that was kind of interesting. 68 hits, usually in the opposing rink, it's not the away team that leads that category, right? I thought it was a little more physical than Paul maybe led on a little bit. I thought in the first period, especially, the Jets kind of set that tone. In the second period, it dipped a little bit, but.
It's funny you mentioned the physicality because obviously we talked about that earlier on in the post game show. But I was reading, and Dave Tippett also didn't think it was that physical of a game, which I was surprised about because I mean, yes, after the first maybe 10 or 12 minutes of the game, the physicality dropped off a bit there, Sean. But I mean, it certainly was noticeable. To start the game. I mean, a Jets team that really you don't think of as being particularly physical, an Oilers team that, maybe with the exception of, a guy like Zach Cassian, you don't think of as being particularly physical. There was certainly a fair bit of physicality, at least to start, Sean. So I was surprised that both coaches sort of put the poo-poo on the physical nature of the game.
I'm not overly surprised. I think, like you said, it started out hot, and I think there was a couple of things that stood out. I mean, Dylan DeMello getting absolutely wallpapered and destroyed at some point. And the other part about it is I think you saw, a guy like Neil Pionk get the body on Connor McDavid quite a bit. So I think that's why it looks bad, because you don't usually get a body on a guy like Connor McDavid. But I'd say it like this. I think it says something about the game as we know it now. I remember you used to watch those World Juniors, and Team Canada would come out and set the tone in its first game every time and just be destroying teams time and time again. That kind of hockey just doesn't exist anymore. So this is the kind of hockey we look at and think, wow, there's a lot of hits in these games. For the most part, I don't think the coaches saw that, though. I think, Paul Maurice alluded to it, Scott, about, being on the right side of their check, and that's what it looked like. I think that's more along the lines, the guys were throwing bodies, and it seems to happen a lot more in the playoffs. But I still think that they're thinking the hits are the ones that you see Dylan DeMello absolutely nail a guy with, or go back to the regular season when Stanley got a hold of Thomas Chabot. Those are what those guys are talking about, the kind of things that have the ability to kind of ratchet up the intensity and get a little bit of hate going. I thought Paul Maurice's comments about, the lessons that the Jets learned against the Nashville Predators in that series, how every whistle ended with a scrum like that, and how, they basically learned that you go into that scrum, you get a little bit heated, get face washed, and then you skate away, and it really doesn't matter anymore. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that there's some series that we're seeing right now where it's not like that. The players are taking the intensity out of those scrums and continuing it through the games. I just think that Paul Maurice does not want that element in this series. He doesn't want the passion. I think what we saw tonight was a little bit of a somewhat uninspired Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, guys who weren't, we weren't seeing them at the top of their game, at the top of their passion. And hey, if you're a coach who's been in this league long enough, you know that when guys like that are sleeping, leave those guys alone.
Yeah.
And Sean, more importantly, I tried to do a little zoom in there. Who's on the back of that Vancouver Canucks number 64 jersey? I couldn't figure that out there. I thought it.
You know what? I don't even know. I'm at the City TV building, so I think it says Albanese on it. I don't know if that's. I wonder the same thing every time I come in here. I guess I should better. I saw the Winnipeg whiteout sign. I thought there was a good background, and then I.
You should light it on fire, Sean. Just see what happens.
Start a riot.
Yeah, just see what happens.
They'd never let me in the building again. I've got the run of the place right now. I better treat it right.
The clock has struck midnight. It is now Thursday morning. Welcome to everybody still watching us. This is the Legal Curve post-game show, crossed over with Kenny and Rennie and their post-game show, and Scott Billick.
Kenny and Flutie.
I mean, I don't even know what's going on.
Sorry. Flutie and
this is the flute.
No Kenny.
You even brought the flute over to this show, Scott? This is a massive betrayal.
I know this is bad. They asked what it was. I wasn't going to disappoint them. I think most of the people in the chat just come over to your show anyways.
Scott, it's in your name. You wrote it down in the name. It didn't accidentally.
I just didn't change it.
You wrote yourself as Scott the Flute Billick. Come on. You're not fooling anyone, buddy.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
Scotty, we'll get you some Fireball. We're sponsored by Seagram's now, so we'll get that to your house.
Are you actually sponsored by Seagram's?
Good job.
Yes.
Well done.
What do you guys? Jeez, you guys.
Oh yeah,
I might have to come over to your show now. I want some free booze.
I find this fascinating. I'm glad that you guys have Seagram's right now, because I remember when we were covering that series against the Nashville Predators, and you went down there and they gave you the little gift basket that they give you. It's waiting in your chair when you go, as the media members, and you sit down, and it's got like a bunch of stuff. They had a package of like these cheese biscuits that down there. I brought that home, and man, that was a hit. I had to go find more of that when I was down there. But they're throwing a bottle of Jack Daniels, right? Because that's what that area is known for. And I always think
Tennessee whiskey.
It blows me away. That's the number one selling whiskey in the world. The number two selling whiskey in the world is Crown Royal. And every time I have a visitor to Winnipeg, you know, especially if you end up going up north or something like that and passing Gimli, you say, hey, this is where Crown Royal is made. This is like the second largest selling whiskey in the world is made right here, and no one knows about it. So I'm glad that you guys are going down that road with them, because people need to know more about that. If you're down south in Tennessee, they brag about it nonstop. Let's get the bragging rights going here, boys.
They're very passionate.
I agree.
Passionate speech about Crown Royal, and
our sponsor is going to be very happy, Sean.
There you go. I'm trying to steal.
Okay, Sean, you're going to get a bottle.
You guys are stealing our guests here.
Hey, for the record, the guest just showed up in the chat to try and chirp us, and then all of a sudden, we had to extend the love.
We're aware of how it goes.
I got very excited about Scott being in the chat, so I felt the need to send him an email and invite him in.
Well, I was going to come and chirp you. This was the way for me to not chirp you and probably incriminate me, but that Harry Rosen comment. So
yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah. Scott, I hope you're enjoying your last day in media.
It's over with me. Yeah.
Well, I think what we really have to do for game 3 and 4 back here in Winnipeg, we need to do the post-game show right over Kenny's shoulder as he's writing on deadline to make sure that he gets on, that he gets it published onto the sportsnet.ca website in time. I think he'd really appreciate if we were just right over his shoulder doing the extended post-game show while he's working hard to get his story done. Right? I would think he'd be fine with that.
He's a self-proclaimed pacifist, so you wouldn't get punched. He might move his chair a little bit or something, but I don't know.
He'd tell you to wake up. That's the
that's right.
Kenny's violence. He would tell you to wake up.
Every once in a while, I'm a little worried when I'm sitting in my end of the press box and I can hear Scott and Kenny going at it. And I sometimes I'll text Scott and I'm like, "Are you guys okay? Like, do I need to come over there, like, just to separate you guys for 5 minutes?" But you guys get heated.
It's a good thing we wear masks, because Sean would have COVID at this point.
Well, I'm telling you,
it's projected over top of Kenny, and we're both kind of.
I need to drink a lot of water during a show. If I had some to spare it, I'd throw it on the two of them to cool them down, guys. Because they go at it. It's something else.
This is something else. Anyways, Thursday morning now, this is the Illegal Curve post-game show, crossed with Kenny and Rennie and Flutie, as the case may be. Lots to talk about the Winnipeg Jets victory. Going into game 2, guys, how do you see the Jets' approach changing, if at all? Obviously, the caveat to that question is health related, and obviously, if we're going to see Nikolai Ehlers back, that would change the Jets' approach, and if Pierre-Luc Dubois came back, that would change the Jets' approach as well. But let's go on the assumption that it's status quo for the Jets, and we'll find out more tomorrow when they skate. But do you see the Jets trying to just employ? Is this a method that they can replicate game in and game out with success to try and end up winning this series against the Edmonton Oilers?
Yeah, go for it, Sean.
Go for it, Scotty.
Okay, I think it is because we've seen this game from them before, right? Like this is they can play this game with some level of consistency. I think that I think you need the guys to keep doing some of the certain things that they're doing. Neil Pionk being very aggressive with Connor McDavid, right? I thought that was one of the things that really, I don't want to call it game changing, but I thought he did a good job of kind of neutralizing Connor earlier in the game, right? He didn't have a shot until the third period. And I'm not saying that because of Neil Pionk. I mean, in the first period, right at the end there, right? He had probably the best chance the Oilers had outside of their goal in the game, and it wasn't even counted as a shot, right? I think that the Jets need their top line to be better. Outside of Blake Wheeler's, pass, and Kevin Bieksa on Sportsnet during the intermission talked about how Blake cutting to the middle there, stifled Dmitry Kulikov, and I forget who the other guy was beside him, right? Larson. But basically, Larson. Basically what happened was, according to BX, it basically it kind of hogtied them. They didn't know what to do, and it allowed Tucker Pullman, the drive guy, to make it through there and at least get onto the net, right? So they were opportunistic. I think Mark Scheifele, though, he missed a chance. I thought there was a couple lazy giveaways, if we're being honest, from Scheifele. I'm not sure his game was the greatest. I mean, I don't know what that face is from Sean, so maybe he disagrees. But yeah. So I mean, I was just, I thought Connor Hellebuyck was big and boring tonight, and good, right? Like there was some, the save that he made on Jesse Puljujarvi earlier in the game before his goal. I believe it was in the first period, was just pure positional. I mean, he negated that shot because he was just right there. I thought Connor Hellebuyck played a solid game. I think they need that again. I mean, other than that, I think they just need that top line to start, more production. They're going to get credit for production on the empty net tonight. But I would like to see that more, and I think everybody would like to see that more, kind of 5-on-5. So, I think that's where they have to kind of get better at. I think, the game plan, they're going to have to be able to adapt to whatever Dave Tippett and the players changes make, because, this formula didn't work for them. But I mean, you're not going to go a whole series with Connor McDavid getting 2 shots a night, right? Leon Draisaitl had 4, but I wouldn't suggest that many of those were very dangerous. Right. So I think those guys are going to get more. I think there's going to be more rush opportunities for the Oilers. So I think the Jets need to be able to kind of, and they have to clean up. I mean, that goal, that their only goal was kind of, Dylan DeMello kind of gets pickpocketed, right? Mm-hmm. And then it turns into, a bunch of defenders and a goalie not really sure where the puck is. So it's those little things you got to clean up. But at the same time, those things are also going to happen. It's playoff hockey, right? I mean, again, the Jets really just need to be on their toes. I think it was huge that they took this game tonight. And I talked about this before on Kenny and Rennie earlier, and it just like, you take that first game, it changes the complexion of how the Jets feel about themselves, especially, they came to this game, the whole talk was McDavid, 1, and 2, the fact that they lost 7 straight, or 6 straight to the Oilers, right? So, they got rid of those kind of demons and win tonight. But now you can't let up, right? I mean, this can't be the case where the Jets put up a great performance and then the next night they kind of bomb it, right? Or they don't show up. So I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of this series, in my mind, there's a lot of mentality, like a mental side to this series. And the Jets have to maintain that throughout and not let kind of their game dip, because then when it does, those bounces don't go their way, it's mostly because they're just not earning any of the bounces in general. So
I think if you take a look at tonight's game, it is the blueprint. I think it's exactly what Paul Maurice said that this team was going to need to do going into the playoffs. You got to eliminate the off the rush chances. You got to get to the front of the net, things that the Winnipeg Jets weren't doing very good before this. You got to slow down. And I guess he took umbrage with me saying that. But someone, I thought it was him. I know Todd Woodcroft said it on our show. And then I said to Kenny, because someone in the media said it later, and I said to Kenny, is Todd still on these meetings? Because he's using the exact same language as those guys are using. But and I think what you're seeing, Scott, from that top line is a function of that. I don't necessarily agree that we need to see that much more from them. Lowry is getting out and getting a huge piece of Leon Draisaitl. I thought he did a good job with that.
I just mean offense, I guess, right? You want to see that production,
I'm getting there. So Scheifele's line has to go in and do a shutdown of the Connor McDavid line for the most part. I know they're spreading it around all over the place, but I think that what's the thing that you always have to worry about with that line of Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, and Connor McDavid? They get to a place, and there's a reason that the fans get so frustrated with that line, is because they get to a place where they start playing Harlem Globetrotter style of hockey, and they get sucked into that, and then they fall into that, and that's what they want to do, and they want to stay on the outside, and they want it to look really pretty. Well, I thought tonight they did a really good job of staying within the structure, the kind of hive mind. They were all of one mind, Paul Maurice said, going into the playoffs. I think they did a good job of staying in that and then trying to just capitalize on the couple chances they had. I go back to that 3-on-2 they had earlier in the game where Wheeler set up Scheifele, and Scheifele had the wide open net and missed it. They got their chances, and it just so happened that what does this line do really good? They capitalize on their opportunities. They're opportunistic. We know the whole team can be like that. That line especially can be like that. They didn't necessarily get those earlier in the game. What it did show up in is it showed up when the net was empty. They got their opportunities. They capitalized on those opportunities. I don't think the Jets and Paul Maurice wants to risk trying to open those guys up offensively. I think what you're saying is those guys need to score because Connor McDavid's going to score. I think what Paul Maurice and the Winnipeg Jets are thinking is we need to try and do to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl what we did over and over and over and over again for the next 7 games. And yes, we think that they are going to go out and they're going to get their points, but we think that we can close them down enough or have a better chance of winning this series if we try and shut them down and then squeeze out some efforts like we did tonight from the rest of our lineup, because we believe we're deeper and that depth should get us over the top, especially when guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois and Nick Ehlers come back, than they are if they get into a shooting competition with their top line against the other top.
To your point there, Sean, I mean, and I said this earlier, I mean, you look at the high danger chances tonight, it was 14-9 in favor of the Oilers. And okay, 5 more high danger chances, but the Oilers' high danger chances weren't off the rush. They weren't what I would describe as especially dangerous high danger chances. And the Jets, I think, are fine with that being at 14-9 and the 5 high danger chance disparity there. If that is all of a sudden, high danger chances are 22-17, I don't think the Jets are fine with that. Because the Oilers are going to capitalize if you give them more opportunities. McDavid and Draisaitl are just too good. And admittedly, the Jets are very good offensively as well. But, I would take, in a shootout, I would take McDavid and Draisaitl over, Connor and Wheeler and Scheifele, all no disrespect to those guys. And that's why I think the Jets are fine, with the high danger chances with the way they are. I mean, forget about high danger chances. Look at expected goals in tonight's game. It was almost dead even. At even strength, the Jets had 2.59 expected goals and the Oilers had 2.53. So I do think that, I mean, this Jets team tonight, this is the formula that they have to use more often than not to win the game.
Yeah, well, and I think, Sean, it's not like, Sean's right or Scott's right. I think, they're both wrong. No, just kidding. I mean, I think,
I saw that setup coming.
No, I know, but I mean, I think, the point that Scotty was trying to make here is, like, it's not a question if the way the Jets played tonight is sustainable, right, Sean? Like, it's clearly sustainable, but you're going to have, at least one of your top 2 lines going, right? Like, we know that the Jets can get offense from the bottom lines. And obviously they have the secret weapon, Dominic Toninato now. But I mean, it's just it could work for 1 or 2 games, right, where you don't get any, even strength. Pardon me. I guess I'm kind of discounting the empty net goals, right? Like obviously Connor and Scheifele scored the empty net goals, but we're talking about non-empty net goals. That line is going to have to get going, especially if Dubois and Ehlers aren't going to be back until later in the series, right? And I'm sure you guys are going to talk about it on Kenny and Rennie, right? Like nobody knows right now. Like the Jets aren't going to show their hand. Like it's possible that both of these guys aren't going to be ready for game 2 or game 3. And I agree with Drew. I think, it's more likely that Ehlers comes back first, right? Because of, how recent the Dubois injury was. It's less than a week ago, right? That game against the Leafs. So, you're going to have to definitely, create more offense. But I agree with you, Drew. I don't think the Jets are looking at it, right, and saying, oh, we got to have 12 high danger chances versus 15 high danger chances. That's not how it works. Sean is right. I mean, they're going, if you want to call it more of a defensive minded game, the Jets are absolutely going to have to play more of a defensive minded game. As soon as you open it up, then Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, love it. They have more time and space, and they're going to start to get their points.
I want to know one thing. I'm trying to figure out if a game goes to overtime, and we were already lamenting the idea that we would be a little bit later. We could be getting close to when our Saturday show. Sean, you and Ken, you guys are going to be starting at like 3-4 in the morning.
Well, and he'll just want to keep going. Like he'll say, okay, well, let's go to 8 a.m. If
Kenny is ridiculous.
He gets goaded on. He just wants to go and go. I started telling him afterwards. We do I don't know if you guys, when you're done, you shut the live feed off and you do a little debrief. That's what we always do.
Oh yeah, we have a lot. Well, as we usually kick Drew out, and Ezzy and I do like a little post game round.
Yeah, there's a post. We do shots of Fireball now, Sean.
Yeah. Well, mine looks like this. I've got a big smile on my face. I say goodbye. And then I turn it off and I say, Ken, what the hell are you doing? I got a life. I got a family I got to take care of here. But yeah, the guy, it's all he wants to do, talk hockey nonstop. Hey, I wanted to touch on one last thing after what you were saying there, Ezzy and Scott, about that top line of the Jets. One thing about them, I think, is they're clearly, the plan is to play cautious. It's to play defensive hockey. If they get down in the game, you'll see the risk profile will change, right? They'll start activating more. They'll start to do that. So there really was no need for them to try and throw the kitchen sink at being offensive tonight. The game called for them to play it tight, to play it close. Yeah, I know people hate the idea that that's a line that gets so many of its points from empty net goals. And when you hear something like you guys heard that stat this year, Auston Matthews, out of all the goals he scored, he didn't have one empty net goal. I mean, how much different is that compared to what we see here in Winnipeg? No doubt, but I think I don't think the Jets are going anywhere in the playoffs unless they get that top line to buy into trying to stop the other team rather than trying to outscore that other team. I think it's just their instinct to head down that road. I think that's what the entire year was. I think we've seen it in years past. I think 2019 was all about that. Those guys just kind of falling in love with what they're able to do and going down that and getting away from playing the right kind of hockey. So keeping them in check and keeping them defensive minded as long as you possibly can, probably in my mind is the plan for the coach. And I would agree. I think it keeps them in this series as long as they can and gives them the best chance of winning this series.
Yeah. And I would just add that I don't think that they can, expect these unlikely heroes every night either. I mean, yes, this is where the playoffs, this is what happens in the playoffs. You see this all the time, right? I mean, Craig Smith scores a goal for the Boston Bruins tonight off of an Ilya Samsonov, terrible giveaway or just a brutal play, and everybody saw what Ovi did after that, obviously. But I guess my counter to Sean is yes, they do that. My only thing is then if Mark Scheifele gets a kind of a 3-on-1 there or whatever it was, and he gets that, you bury that puck, and I think I think that goal would have been huge for Scheifele, because the reason for that, I think, is because there's been so much talk over not even just this year but last year and all this stuff. I mean, him and Connor McDavid are good friends. I mean, I've seen them in the bottom of Rogers Place talking after a game, after we're walking out, out of the game, and they're sitting there chatting it up after the game in Edmonton there. I remember last season seeing that. But I think the psychological advantage of him, getting that first goal in the series and getting that upper hand, especially after Connor McDavid missed on his opportunity, I just thought that would have been a huge thing for Mark. in the way that he is playing, because I don't think Mark Scheifele's on that level, right? I don't think a lot of people would put him on that level. Can he play on that level? I think so, because we saw it in 2017-18 and during those playoffs. He was unbelievable, right? I mean, that's the type of playoff performance you'd want from your top line center, right? So anyways, that's just kind of, you have to, yes, you need to, I think the MO for that line has changed. They need to be defensive, like Sean said. I do think they need to find a couple of goals at some point here, you know, in big moments, right? Big lines need to show up in big moments, and that's what that line needs to do.
Game 2 of the Jets and the Oilers will, of course, be Friday night. We'll have another post-game show for you right around the same time, assuming there's no overtime, right around 10:40, give or take a couple of minutes. If there's overtime, all bets are off, and who knows when, who knows what the schedule will look like at that point in time. Never mind Monday if there's any overtime with the very late 8:45 local time start to make sure everybody's, get your nap in. At least it's a holiday on Monday. You can take a nap before the game starts there, Mr. Flute.
I don't need a nap. I'm like Kenny. Yeah. I mean, I can go all night. I mean, that's just ask my no. That was close.
Stop.
That was close.
Scott,
this is a legal curve.
This is a family show still. I know it's after 12 o'clock, and you think it turns.
You're sponsored by a booze company. What are you talking?
That's true. That is true.
That's true. But we
and
we
Harry
don't
Rosen now too.
If I get you that, I want a suit. That's what I'm saying.
Alrighty,
I'll tell you what, Sean, I texted Kenny and I said that we've stolen you and we're not giving you back. So
that's good. I was going to say this stuff that Scotty's trying to pull, it doesn't fly on Kenny and Rennie, but I like this. I like this loose atmosphere. Let's let it all out here. Let the hair down.
Exactly. It's like the show. The longer the show goes, the more inappropriate it gets. Something like that. I was going to say, gentlemen, we'll let Sean and Scott head over to Kenny and Rennie because I think you guys
give them the boot already.
Give them the boot.
Yeah, let's get rid. Although we actually have the power, so I'll let these guys go.
I mean, I'm gonna. You can't fire me. I quit.
Oh, yeah, say your goodbyes.
There you go.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, boys. Enjoy Kenny and Rennie with a special guest, Scott Billick. That'll get started.
This is a little bit better. 3
Don't
is
they
good.
say 5's a crowd, right?
5 is a crowd. I agree with it. I agree with Ezzy. I mean, come on, boys. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We allow a guest occasionally. I don't think so. That was a little too much.
I was going to say
I did like some of the comments. There was one comment I texted it to Ezzy because it was like, this show has turned into the Scott and Sean show with 3 guys nodding along.
They haven't had the chance to get their opinions on record. We've already had our chance to get our opinions on the record. And if you want more,
it was videos of Reddit. The new title of the show, the Sean and Scott Show, with 3 guys watching quietly and nodding.
With if you want more post-game conversation, you can head over to the Kenny and Rennie YouTube channel. They're going to get started, assuming Ken Wiebe is going to show up, and they're going to get started.
I think it should call it the Kenny, Rennie, and Flute.
Kenny, Rennie, and Flute. I think it just rolls off the tongue. Yeah. And, it may as well they go do that. We are going to wrap up with our final thoughts from tonight's contest, the Jets with the 4-1 victory over the Edmonton Oilers. Remind everybody, Friday night we'll be back here to do a post-game show for Game 2 of the Jets and the Oilers. And then Saturday morning, of course, we'll be back with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So plenty of us over the next 24 to 48 hours. Never mind the back-to-back.
Sorry, I was just going to say Scott is back in the chat. Sorry, this has been fun. I just love it that we just kicked him out and he's still in the chat. I gotta love it. Scotty's a beauty. Love him.
Scotty is a beauty. It's a good group of guys. The top notch all around.
Like Troy Stevens. That's a good comment. You guys are like Billy, Sammy, and Dylan. Lots of talent, but don't get much ice time.
Give me some final thoughts before we wrap this up, and I can go
send Troy the link. Let's get Troy in here.
It's long past my bedtime.
I've never met Troy, but I like him.
It looks like Huss is in the chat too with their Winnipeg Sports Talk. Huss is in the chat as well. We should have sent Huss the link. Then it really could have been a party.
Oh man!
Want me to send Huss the link? I can send.
No,
we got to
save it for Friday. It's late. I'm ready for bed.
Huss wants to join us on Friday. He can.
Yeah, exactly.
Final thoughts?
Give me something. Or don't, or just let me finish. Let me wrap the show. It's up to you.
This segment of the show is sponsored by Fireball Whiskey. You can get Fireball Whiskey at your local liquor marts. Fireball Whiskey.
Yeah. Also, Seagram's 83, Seagram's 88. we have links on illegalcurve.com. You get some discounts, in fact, actually. If you
Drew, you
go
really
through-
expect us to say anything intelligent at 12:20?
I don't expect you to say anything intelligent at 8:20.
I was going to tell people, because, of course, we got to be promoting it,
Yeah.
is that if you didn't get a chance to join us live for the Manitoba Moose end of season roundtable, which featured myself and Daniel Fink and Austin Saragusa of the Manitoba Moose, we had a really good chat with head coach Pascal Vincent, GM Craig Heisinger, as well as 3 players, Dylan Sandberg, Johnny Kovacevic, and Jeff Malott. Really good insight. They all had different things to say about probably the most unique season we'll ever witness in the AHL. Hopefully it's the only one of its kind and things get back to normal. But, we ran a 2-hour show yesterday, and it was a lot of fun to do.
You did a great job, Dave. I tuned in for a big part of it, and it was awesome.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Ezzy. And you know what? It was just, like I said, I just thought they provided some really good insight. So we've got that available on illegalcurve.com. You can watch on our YouTube channel. And I condensed the podcast, so it's only the interviews. So if you want to hear from those guys, like I said, those are 2 of your 2 players who people would expect to be potentially your right and left side pairing, potentially in Kovacevic and Sandberg. And Zinger's it gives you the unvarnished truth about it had some really interesting things to say, called Ville Heinola the best player in the AHL during his games with the Moose. So I thought it was really good. I thought they provided a lot of insight, and Pascal Vincent always does what he does, which is gives you a lot of insight into the way his team is running. So if you get a chance, you should go check that out, like I said, on our YouTube channel, or you can download it on our iTunes channel as well.
And Drew, I've
Very
only
good.
got one final thought, because we have, I think, around 366 people watching right now. There's still time. Hit that like button. We're over 400
Yes.
likes. If you're not subscribed and you like the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you don't like the show, then I guess you're not going to subscribe, but definitely smash the subscribe button, hit the like button. And, it was fun doing the show tonight, almost 2 hours. We had Scotty Billick and Sean Reynolds jump on. It was lots of fun. Looking forward to doing it on Friday, boys.
There you go. Very well said, Ezzy. Want to give a shout out to our sponsors, as Dave mentioned, Seagram's, of course, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Bernstein's Deli, Zappia Group Realty, and our friends at Boston Pizza. Support these fine local businesses because they support Illegal Curve Hockey, and they make this show a possibility. If you want more Jets and Oilers post-game conversation, head over to the Kenny and Rennie YouTube page. They're going to get started along with Mr. Flutie himself, Scott Billick. So the Kenny, Rennie, and
Not
Flutie.
Doug, though. Not Doug.
Not Doug. No, Kenny, Rennie, and Flutie, they're going to get started over there if momentarily, if they haven't already done so. We will be back Friday night for the post-game show after the Jets and the Oilers game 2. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get alerted each and every time we go live here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, smash the like button, all that good stuff. We do it so that you guys have somewhere to talk about and come together to talk about the Jets game. And really, if it wasn't for the audience and if it wasn't for our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you so much to everybody who's joined us for almost over an hour and 45 minutes. So probably our longest post-game show as of yet. And it's probably only going to get longer as the playoffs ratchet up and the intensity continues to increase. For Sean Reynolds and Scott Billick, who joined us earlier, for Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mindell. Until Friday, right around 10:40 p.m. and the post-game show for Game 2, we wish you good night and good luck, and thanks for watching the Illegal Curve post-game show.